As opposed to getting rid of the creepy dolls in the attic, you decide to clean them and fix them up. This made the little ghost girl very happy. The two dolls were delicate porcelain creatures, both with pale, cracked faces, but where one missed an old green eye, the other missed an arm. They barely had a tuft of hair between them, just a few wiry curls left, once brown but now white. Hair that had aged as if it were real. Their clothes were rotten and their skin patched by decades of rain dribbling in through cracks in the attic roof. Dripped for so long that it had corroded their fragile bodies and punctured holes into their hollows. Tommy stared at them now, at the two dolls, as he'd done many times before. Always too scared to touch, so he just stared. Not that he was even allowed up in the old attic where rats skittered behind beams and where cobweb hammocks sagged and swayed in a cold draft. Mommy and Daddy had told him never to go into the attic alone, that it was unsafe, but they weren't always there to watch him, and in those silent moments he'd sneak up and stare at the belongings of the two sisters, dead decades ago. It had been a fire, extinguished before it had consumed the house entirely, but not before it had devoured the children. A terrible accident that had led to this day, to Tommy staring entranced at the dolls. The wind cried through the rafters, and rain dripped onto the doll with the missing arm. Tommy thought of the girls they had once belonged to. Not all the damage to the dolls was through weathering. Much was through love, through hugging and tea parties and naps together, bathing together. He just knew the dolls and the girls had been inseparable once upon a happier time. That made his little heart all the more sad, that the dolls and girls were both so far apart now. He hadn't had the courage before, not ever. Or perhaps he had been building it up for this day, saving little cups of courage for one big gulp. Tommy stepped over the dolls, sheltering them from the rain. Gulp. He stooped and picked them up, cradled them carefully as he moved them to a dry spot the other end of the attic. He ripped up tartan fabric he found folded in an old leather trunk and swapped the moldy clothing on the dolls to something still old, but at least clean. Their new hair came from a rocking horse's mane, thick and unruly, but plentiful. The new eye, a marble. The best he could do for a new arm was the leg of an ancient teddy bear soldier. He tore it free and pushed it in the empty socket. Then, for the first time in a long time, the dolls left the house. The graveyard was muddy, and willows shook above the tombstones as the wind roared. Mist rolled by in spiraled plumes. Tommy had only ever been so scared once before. Their gravestones were moss-covered and dirty, and Tommy wiped his sleeves over the names to make sure. When certain, he laid the dolls on top of each patch of grass, sad to make their new dresses muddy. They looked forlorn on the ground, the marble eye glinting sadly in the moonlight, the soft leg arm limply hanging. "I'm sorry," he said. "It was all I could do." A cold hand touched his shoulder. "It was your best," said a soft voice. Sarah's voice. "And that was always good enough," said Catherine. The sister stood behind him smiling. The moonlight traveled through them to the muddy grass. Sarah held something in her hands, but Tommy couldn't make it out. Catherine bent down and took her doll. She pulled the leg out of the socket, so the doll once more had only one arm. Sarah took the leg from her sister. She pushed it into the object she held, then passed an old, beloved soldier bear to Tommy. "I'm scared," he said. "We know, but it's finally time for us all to go," said Sarah, "and at least we leave together." "I'm sorry it took me so long," said Tommy. "I wanted to come so much sooner, but I was so scared." "We would have waited for you forever if that's what it took," said Catherine kindly, as she placed an arm around her little brother. Tommy hugged his bear tightly to his chest as they stepped into the mist.